this work isn't about me at all. It's about recognising the strength and the grace of all the women on whose shoulders we stand and take inspiration from. It's about the unsung heroes, those that have taken a stand quietly and powerfully, often without seeking or receiving glory or recognition, but simply wishing to make their voices heard. From the suffragists to the Greenham women and the women's liberation movement, women have stepped up to fight for not just their own rights, but the rights of other people and all of us. To have the vote, to have equality, to live free from violence, fear, discrimination, or live under the threat of nuclear annihilation. I recently wrote an article for New Internationalist about Greenham and Fastlane 40 years on. A common theme that emerged, which resonates across all the movements that I photographed, is that women are often driven by this deep nurturing mothering instinct to protect their own children and those of others. And I have seen this and heard this, like while I've been out photographing. It's often women's inspiration for stepping up. There's some quotes up on the board there, and like one or two of them touch on that as well. And whatever movement it is, in the slideshow you'll see there's pictures from the Myanmar protests, Palestine, Iran, Ukraine, Black Lives Matter, even the freedom movement. It's driven by this kind of like, let's protect our children and our children's future. The Greenham women saw global wars being waged and weapons of mass destruction being created by men, yet it's always women and children who are disproportionately affected. And that's the same with the climate movement and wars anywhere. Women play crucial roles on the front line and behind the scenes. They put their bodies, their liberty on the line, but just as often they are holding it together in the background and just getting shit done, basically. This work spans a 2-year period, and it's ongoing and it's evolving and it crosses many movements, it includes many different voices. I really hope you enjoy looking at it. And a big thanks to these 4 here amazing women that have come to speak and at mine and Anna's request. I'm really pleased to have you, thank you. A final thing, I'm really sorry to anyone who hoped to see themselves in the pictures on the walls. And I'm also equally sorry to anyone that hoped that they wouldn't see themselves in the pictures. and that I'm going to pass over and we can start doing.
Okay, so I'll do a really quick intro, top line of our illustrious panel tonight. So here we have Dorothea Hackman, who, if you don't know her from Camden, I think you do know everyone in Camden, don't you? just about. And then we've got Chantelle Lunt, who's come all the way from Liverpool, which is great. Thanks for coming, making it down there. We've got Caren, who's come from Leicester, where you get a smarter investor, apparently. Sorry, I just had to rhyme. And then we've got Clare, who is co-founder of Extinction Rebellion. So they've all got very different experiences, but they're all really radical. And so I'm just going to keep my questions really short. So I'm going to ask each one, maybe starting with Dorothea. How did you arrive at being an activist? What was your journey into taking action?
I had a grandmother after whom I was named, who lived vicariously through me, putting my head above any parapet I could find. And when I was a teenager, those parapets were women's liberation and bring our Australian troops back from Vietnam, and even saving the whale. I wish we had saved the planet as well at the same time, but we didn't know yet that that's what we should have been doing. And so it went on. When I got to this country, we were trying to save adult education and the abolition of the ILEA. So I became a very active trade unionist, where I learned all about marches and all those different things that are so incredibly useful now. But skipping ahead, in 2008, it was announced that High Speed 2 would be built starting at Euston. Why didn't they start in Glasgow and come south? Because that would be really useful. But no, and you know, all these years later, they still haven't worked out how to bring the track into Euston. And I am bewildered that they are allowed to squander so much money when they don't even know how to do it. I mean, Mornington Bridge, they were going to jack up so that they could put the track underneath and lower it again because it's all Grade 1 listed or whatever. And then they realised it's holding the cutting apart. So if they jack it up, the cutting will collapse in. This, I think, has the makings of a great novel when I get round to it. So, 2008, 2009, I played it by the book. Luckily, I became chair of Camden Civic Society, which was a charity with a charity number and a bank account. And it doesn't get better than that if you want a bit of activism. So we petitioned and we followed all the proper democratic routes, and they were just laughing at us because they never ever were going to take any notice about petitions. There were times when they would issue, with like 10 days notice, 500-page documents that we had to respond to. So we divvied it up. Somebody took traffic, somebody took compensation, somebody else, me, took trees and green and open spaces. So that's how I've ended up where I am now. 2015, we realised that they were just making a mockery of us. 2017, they brought in the hybrid bill. What I would say, I think, is that many organisations helped us in our fight. Many good lawyers, many organisations like Friends of the Earth. But before Extinction Rebellion was around, Friends of the Earth were running workshops for us on non-violent direct action. And we tried and look what's happened. We have an area the size of Trafalgar Square devastating us around Euston, which doesn't mean that we're not still campaigning northward. I mean, the fight has shifted to the Colne Valley and up to Staffordshire, but we have to keep trying to mitigate and stop the worst of this. So that's me, and aside from that, I crochet.
Not sure how I'll follow that. I can't even sew. But I'm Chantelle Lunt. I am an activist, a writer, an educator, and many other things. I am the founder of Miss BLM Alliance, one of the co-founders of the Kill the Bill Coalition, and I run a campaign called Operation Withdraw Consent, and I record a podcast called Why I'm No Longer Talking to Institutionally Racist Police. You might notice a theme there. So in terms of my journey to activism, I feel like everyone who's like, you know, a woman in activism story starts a little bit with a strong woman. And so for me, and I'll keep it concise because the trains are a bit awful and I've got to get off early because the train's been cancelled. But I was raised in foster care, and I was raised by a woman called Joan Edison, incredible woman, in a massively white, massively racist area, just raised by this one wonderful woman who grew up in the 40s in the post-war era. And I didn't really realise how much of an effect my mum, because that's who she was, had on me, because she would just stand on her own in any space and fiercely protect us and fight against anything that was wrong. But also she had this, you know, she wasn't massively educated. She grew up she was in a foster home raised by nuns, and they basically thought she didn't have to go to school because she was black. But she could see through the BS in society, and so she would take kids in who everyone told her were naughty kids, who everyone told her were nothing, and she would see through all that BS and see a child and the spirit of a child and the good in people. So she sort of gave me a really good BS radar. And so for me, like, people will often say, how did you become an activist? And it's probably, I don't think that I've come across anyone with a similar story to me. So I used to be a police officer, for anyone who didn't know. And after my experiences of racism and misogyny in the police force, I did loads in the police force to try and highlight it, to fight against it, and then became the target of bullying and harassment and sexual, all that stuff that they do to you when you become a whistleblower in the police force. And then I went on to found Merseyside BLM Alliance, really fight against what I knew was happening within the police force and to really say, listen, this is what's happening. And this is at a time when, you know, we didn't know about the day carrots, we didn't know about all the stuff that is out there and well known now. I was one of the few people saying, no, this is what is happening in the police force, we need to listen. And people sort of would say, when did you become an activist? And for the longest time I thought, well, it was when I picked up a megaphone. But then I realised actually when I became an activist was when I stood up in a police station when no one was even looking at me and said, you have an issue. There's that racist officer, he's a rapist, he's a sexual predator, and I'm not going to look the other way. Because that's what activism is. Sometimes it's being the only woman. And so, you know, I've always been in unions, except for the 2 years I was a police officer because you can't be in a union. I've always been at rallies and at protests, and I think kind of my journey has just been around what is making me angry and what am I appalled about in this moment. So the police make me angry all the time. The fact that the air that we breathe is polluting and killing us makes me angry all the time. And the way young people are treated, mainly by society, makes me angry all the time. So 6 years ago, I made the mistake of thinking I could fix a lot of those things other than the police by joining the police, and now I know that I can fix a lot of those things by doing what I do now. So it's been an interesting journey to activism, but I'd say the reason, it was really scary in the beginning, it was super scary in the beginning to be the only person saying something. And if you've been in the police force, I read a headline saying it said taking on the police force is like taking on the mafia. And they make you feel like that, they make you feel like if you say something, and they do, like I had people coming to me door, they do stuff to you, do you know what I mean? They really come for you. But I'd say the one thing that activism did for me is it took away my fear. All the fear I had, even though, you know, they might get me one day, but a lot of the fear I had was before I picked up a megaphone and before I took away the power that that force had over me. So I feel like it can really alleviate your fear and it can make you brave. So yeah, that's my little journey to activism.
Chantelle, you've reminded me that probably the first time I realised that I was doing anything that resembled activism was when twice I kind of got suspended, once from the probation service and another time from the teaching profession because I wasn't prepared to just overlook rubbish that was going on for the vulnerable people who we were supposed to be working for. So thanks for having included that. But no, my life changed when I went to Jamaica. I worked there for 9 months when I was 18, and I looked at Britain for the first time from a different place, and never looked at Britain the same after that. And so when I came back, I went to uni in London, I really struggled because I was just horrified. Everywhere I looked, all I saw was consumerism. I seemed to no one cared about people who were suffering, and I really struggled to ignore it, and I just wanted to leave my course and just leave everything really. And got involved with the miners' strike and the Green and Common. And that was like, that was kind of worthwhile, except that back in the 80s, when we didn't have mobile phones and stuff, it was dead hard to keep in contact with people. So, you know, you'd have a phone at the end of your hall of residence, and it was potluck whether the phone call came through to tell you where to be. And so actually it was dead hard being an activist back in the early 80s. My experience was very, very limited when I was a young person. And then I moved up to Sheffield and eventually worked in Rotherham when I was with the probation service. And what I saw in Rotherham, in terms of poverty, was the worst thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was worse than any of the poverty I'd seen in Jamaica. And what I realised was that, you know, in Britain, if you can't, well, I don't even do this in Jamaica anymore from what I've heard, but you know, you couldn't find food growing along the street, and you couldn't walk along the paths without shoes on. And the people who were in Rotherham, I saw the underclass in a way I'd never seen it before. So that was that made a big mark. And then I had my lost years, as I call them, and at the end of my 7 years of being lost, I started to have children, and had 4 children, and during that time, that was like 24 years of just amazingly being a parent, and with all that comes with that. And the only thing that I really did in relation to campaigning then was I joined the Green Party, became treasurer of the Green Party for Leicester, and that kept me kind of, or got me back engaged a little bit. But I always understand, I mean, I don't know how you do it, Chantelle, but, you know, people who, I totally understand it, were members of the public, just can't give anything because they're busy holding down a job, running a family, doing everything that you do. So that was amazing. And then some of my kids were still at home when 2018 happened, and we were on a holiday down in Devon, and I heard on the radio that XR had like blocked all the bridges, and I was jumping up and down in front of the family saying, it's happening, the revolution's happening, and I had nothing to do with it, but I felt all this hope, you know, that something was rising. And then there was the tar sands thing with Greenpeace, and at the end of the year, I remember getting a questionnaire from Greenpeace, and at the end of it said, so anything else you wanted to say? And I said that if I had my life again, I'd join Greenpeace because I wanted to do everything they were doing, you know, which is all about activism. I said, but I'm too old, you know. So I was like 55 or something at this stage, and then something really weird happened. Someone from that questionnaire passed my details on to somebody, because all of a sudden I started to get phone calls. Before I knew it, I'd been invited to an MVDA training, and I'd been invited to a Know Your Rights in Leicester, and all of a sudden I was being linked in with these people, right? Kids were still at home. And then my youngest son, left home in October 2019, and a friend in Leicester said, I'm going to the Rebellion in London, do you want to come? I went, what's that? She goes, it's XR. I said, don't know, it sounds great, so I came along with her. And what I realised was that my kids had left home. I didn't realise how much it had kept me strapped to my role as a parent, and all of a sudden that had changed. I love my kids a bit, but the fact they've all flown the nest is just amazing, because I can do all of these terrific things now. So off I went to, I had 3 days down in London and thought, right, I need more of this. I went down as a legal observer, because I thought, I can't get arrested. So I was a legal observer, and I was looking around going, well, I can do this, but I want to do something different. I want to do what they're doing. It's much more, kind of looks a bit more interesting. So the next time I met the XR crew was at a Black Friday thing, and this lad in Leicester said, well, XR won't do anything for the next 6 months, so if you want to do something, come to a Stop HS2 camp. I said, what's HS2? They said, and I said, well, I thought that was a swanky train. I thought that was, classic, like, ignorant person who doesn't bother to check anything out. So then I spent the next 2 years over in Warwickshire getting involved with the Stop HS2 camps, and got loads of skills. So I used to look at these people going up the trees and living in the tree house. I used to look at them and go, oh, God, imagine being able to do that. And then about 6 months in, I thought, I'm going to try this. And then within several months, I was like living in a tree for like 8 days on the shore road. And then even the kids came over and waved over the fence, going, bloody hell, that's my mum. So that was really good. And then, I learned a lot about how tree surgeons steal our trees, because they sell them for money, and I saw how they took more trees than they were supposed to because they get more money, and the brutal abuse of our natural world started to really kick in. And so loads of arrests were happening at this point. I've gone from being a legal observer to being arrested every week, and then camp life, I helped set up camp, and then discovered the horrors of trying to run a camp. Well, I wasn't running it, but I was meeting some great experienced people who knew how to set up camps, but the complexities of it, that was another experience. And then Palestine Action kicked in. They came to Leicester, and I ended up helping out on that 6-day occupation of Palestine Action, and I met all of these Free Palestine people in Leicester, and this whole community, whole coming together, whole world around me was becoming massively interesting. And then a few months later, Insulate Britain, and it was like, this is obvious, it's all about the poor people, it's all about the climate, sit on the roads, loads more arrests. And then COP26 came along, COP26, and I went up there because I was raging about the trees. I hadn't recovered from, I knew a bit about the Amazon. I knew that that was all a bit too far away. What had happened with HS2 was I'd made a connection with the natural world. So when I was listening to COP26 talk about ending deforestation in the next 9 years, I thought, 9 years, there won't be any bloody trees left in 9 years, you know. And so then that's when I jumped on the Jack's train with the pellets and sat on the train and just did something. And I was 57 or something by then. And the other thing I thought was I've met a few women who are in their 60s and they've said, oh, Karen, I can't do that because I've lost all the elasticity in my muscles. Well, I could feel the elasticity in my muscles, you know, fast disappearing. I thought, I better get up this train before I can't do it, you know. And so that was November 2021, and then February 2022 was just up oil, and then I learned how to dig tunnels and live in tunnels, and we had a massive fail, literally fail, and then I learned about how important it is to be linked up in our campaigns, because we need to know what each other are doing. Then went to prison, 7 days, and discovered, you know, prison, actually, if you choose to go to prison, it's a very privileged position. It's doable, but that's not for most people. Most people don't choose to go to prison, so it's not a joke, you know. And then now the unions are rising, the workers are rising, and that's where I'm going to be until we bring down this capitalist nonsense.
I don't know what to say after all that. Well, I guess most of the time people talk about me as like, oh, here's Claire, she's co-founder of XR, and the reason why lots of people do that, I think, is because it's sort of label that gets attached to people, and if you appear a lot, then people just go, that's what you do, that's what you've done. But I guess if you go back to sort of the reasons why I do what I do, and the reason that I am who I am, I think it has an awful lot to do with my younger life, in quite moved around a lot, had a very fractured, broken family, lost my mum when I was 13, mothered my 7 years younger brother. I had friends at secondary school who all used to sort of joke at me like, oh, you're like little mum in the summer holidays, you don't have a holiday, you like look after your little brother, take him to the park and like museum or go shopping, or you're always doing stuff, look after him. And I think growing up with that kind of trauma and tragedy of the sort of years that built up to me moving to London has in some ways is sort of the making of me being the type of, having the type of resilience that I've had as a sort of as a woman. I also think that the reason why I'm so sort of passionate about the work that I do is also because I'm a designer. So you know, I studied art and fashion, but I always thought that I should have been a scientist, really, and because I thought maybe that would be useful. Now I know the truth, so don't worry. It's not really worked, has it, guys? But I was really interested in chemistry and science, so when I did my A-levels, I did chemistry, and everyone said, don't do chemistry if you're just doing it for an extra thing. But I did, because it was the only extra one that I wanted to do. And then when I went to fashion school, I just thought, God, this is a fucking waste of time, like, what am I doing? But I actually think that in some ways having a view on the humanities side of things and on arts, and having a view on the scientific side of things, has given me a great sort of confidence in some ways to be able to sort of straddle the worlds that are required for like do this work, and to help set up the art department at the start of XR. And I guess the other important thing that's on the journey was coming to London and meeting some people who are part of a thing called the Space Hijackers. And they also got called middle class art school wankers by other activists. And but we used to do things that were very much based in the situationist kind of tradition, like take up public space, transform it, turn it into something that it wasn't before, make people walk into a place that they think they know and have a completely new thought about it. And I think that some of the essence of that work, the audacity and the cheekiness and the humour was, you know, a major sort of component of some of the creativity that went into things like going, let's put a pink boat in Oxford Circus. There was definitely that spirit that sort of carried through from the hijackers' time and into the start of Extinction Rebellion. The tank. So, well, the Space Hijackers was most well known, I guess, in some ways for this tank escapade. So we, through a party, decided to buy a tank and then tried to have an auction of a tank outside the arms fair, which most people don't know is happening. So the XL Centre has this big arms fair. A lot of people don't know it's happening. At the time, there were reports as well of like people selling torture equipment in there and things that were actually unlawful. And of course, the XL Centre tries to make it quite quiet what's going on at that particular point in time. And lots of people have done funny things to try and draw attention to the arms fair, like Mark Thomas chained himself to a train, I think, and then my mate Robin took prosthetic arms in briefcases on the trains and would like humiliate the men on the trains just when they were about to get off at the stop, going, "Are you an arms dealer, sir?" And then like pull out a bunch of fake arms. And so we tried to like we talked about what to do to try and draw attention to it. Some Christian activists, I think, performed a massacre on the steps of the arms fair as well at some point, and you know barely got any coverage, and we were all sort of trying to think about what we could do to draw attention to it. So we bought this tank and then said, let's go take it outside the arms fair and do an auction. It'd be very funny. And then the police were also constantly tracing what we were doing, and we were quite well aware that it was like all that time for spy cops and shit. Everybody knew that there were like, you know, people inside everyone's groups and stuff. So we went to this lockup to get the tank, and I'd skived off work. I rang in sick to work so that I could go. And when we arrived, the police were there, even though I think people had been moving it around to try and evade them. And the police said, oh, you know, you can't move this tank because it's like a really weird six-wheeled personnel vehicle that doesn't have an MOT, but because it doesn't have an MOT, we're gonna say that we need to check it out, and the MOT doesn't exist, so you need a specialist to come and do that, and we haven't got one, so you can't drive it. And my friend Robin turned around to us all and went, if you want to go to the XL Centre, the other tank's arriving in about 25 minutes. And the police all went, what other tank? So we all went over there, and there was a white tank limo, which you might remember Vivienne Westwood doing protests with one of those. And you know, there were girls in bikini tops and army paint and flyers that all, I think, was saying make love not war, and kind of humiliating arms dealers by giving them these leaflets that say, are you embarrassed about your weapons capability? The size of your rockets, sir? So it was all very tongue-in-cheek, basically. And then later the tank got repainted with a black and white checkerboard stripe, and everyone went in sort of navy blue overalls, and a bunch of our lot, not me, but a bunch of hijackers got nicked for impersonating the police driving it. I can't remember what it was a massive protest in the city of London. G20. Yeah, so they famously all got held on bail for an extremely long time, but they did get the charges dropped, and they did make quite a nice profit out of it in the end. But yeah, that's the story of the hijackers that most people heard. But we did a lot of other stupid stuff. So yeah, my run up to activism is kind of, some of it was just throwing really good parties actually in Limehouse, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for all that. There's some great stories there. Now, what I was going to ask you was, what advice would you give to people who are starting out in activism, but looking at the floor, I don't see that many people who are starting out in activism, so maybe that obviously we'd love some of your words of your wisdom, but also maybe it'd be worth thinking about for this room and for when we do the open mic, what you're thinking of doing next. Because, I don't know, I mean, I know I didn't give you that question when I started, so you might want a few minutes to think about it. We've already had some funny stories. My third question was going to be, what's the funniest or weirdest thing that's ever happened to you? So let's start with that one, and then we can go on to what's next, and then we'll go to questions. Do you want to start, Dorothea? Because we go... Thank you.
Right. Funny thing. Was it funny things in the end?
All
No.
weird.
All weird.
Funny, all weird. Funny and weird.
I'm sure there's far better stories, but I was reminded of this one because for some reason the Camden New Journal printed the photograph, even though it's nearly 3 years old now. What happened was various people were blocking the roads into the High Speed 2 construction site at Euston. Now this is pretty pointless because there are 17 entrances, so it's quite difficult to block all of them. So we were just blocking 1 or 2. And a great lorry came up, and you all know Shell, sat down in front of it, and the lorry driver was incandescent and totally wanted to run her down. So the rest of us, well, some of the others of us, went and sort of stood in front of the lorry so that he could see us. But the police leapt into the lorry and said, reverse now. We do not run over little girls in this country. And I still think that's very funny, but they made us move on. So my friend Joe and I, now you remember lockdown, and when lockdown broke, you were allowed to exercise for an hour in close proximity to your home. So taking the banner, we started jogging ever so slowly along the road. And we got to Drummond Street, so you can see the photograph there. And the police officer was demanding our names and addresses and so forth. Under what provision, officer? COVID. We were breaking COVID regulations, so we gave him our addresses, which were well within 5 minutes of the place where we were standing. And so he had to back off. And I think that's probably the best I can do for a funny thing. I'm sure there must be better funny things in my life. Like, there was this brilliant time they came up from, South London, south of the Thames. So they came up to Euston and they prepared. I mean, people will remember this well. They prepared in a nearby churchyard, and they marched really like the Beatles across the road. They just marched up to the entrance, kerplunk, sat down and locked on before anybody noticed. And they had to bring the angle grinders and the full deal. And that's still one of my funniest memories. Okay, that's what I can do for funny memories.
I'm going to answer both because I've got to shoot soon, but hopefully I've got a few minutes left. So I think advice for the younger generation and just for everyone, my advice will kind of be around not waiting for permission. I always remember when I first was I just remember the rage. So I remember, I had a horrendous time in the police. I was bullied because I wouldn't shut up about them being racist and sexist. And basically, I had loads of hate crimes committed against me, but they didn't arrest anyone. And then towards the end, I realised that I kept my mouth shut. Then good things was happening to me in the police, though. They offered to pay for me to degree, they offered to put me on a pathway to be a detective. But kind of the condition was, don't make a fuss, love. And I always remember this moment where I was looking in the mirror and I was just like it was at the end of my training and I was going to go to this station and I was like, well, you're going to be a police officer. But I was like, the condition is I have to shut up about racism and sexism. And I was just like, I can't do it. So I just handed in my notice that day. And then I always remember the bit thinking, in the turn a blind eye to this, I'll have to turn a blind eye to everything. And then I remember the moment watching what happened to George Floyd and not watching the one who has his knee on his neck to Jordan, but watching the two officers who were white, who were just stood with the backs to it, not seeing what was going on. And I thought, if you stay in a force like that, that's what you have to do. You have to turn your back to everything. And I was so angry. And I knew, at this point I was paying for the interview, getting myself up to my eyeballs in debt. But I knew that I had loads to offer in terms of my knowledge of what was happening in the police, and my criminology degree and all that stuff that I was getting. And I remember going up to so many different activists and movements and saying, I was writing stuff and putting articles out and everyone was sharing it and everyone was sharing my social media posts, and I was like, I need to do more. And there were movements that existed and I was like, can I help, can I support, is there anything I can do? Oh, well, it's not really, we don't really want to be that critical of the police, we don't really want to go from that angle, and everyone was like a little bit scared about what I wanted to say, or it was like, we don't want to do it this way. And I was like, but it needs to happen this way. There'll never be like a moment like this. We need to really strike while the iron is hot. And I never expected that I'd set up. There was going to be no BLM group in Liverpool. There was going to be no BLM. We're the only one in Merseyside because no one wanted to rock the boat. And it was literally, for the time, just me stood outside police stations and stood there just roaring. And I remember people started doing posts what you have to be. Sometimes that one woman stands in the street screaming at a police officer. And it just kind of snowballed from there. But I always think, if I've waited around for someone to tell me it's okay, Chantelle, you're allowed to do this, I'd still be sat at home waiting. So sometimes you just have to say, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. And then, for a funny story, I think this is more of an odd story, so the police hate me, like because I always say, if I go missing, don't think for a second anything happened to me, look straight at them, they've done something to me. Anytime, I'm like, listen, if anything happens to me while I'm young, it's them. But what they try and do is they like to try and arrest me. Like, I make great attempts not to be arrested. I've got 2 kids, you know, I don't want to be arrested, but they'll make great efforts to arrest me. So we were outside Parliament once at the Kill the Bill process, and this was actually an occasion because the bill was about to go through the Police Crime Sentencing Court Bill, which is now the Act. And I was like, boo, give it a good boo. And I was like, do you know what? I'm willing to get arrested. I'm just so angry, like whatever happens, happens. I just like, I want this to make, I'm happy to be arrested. But then the officer who came up to try and arrest me, tried to arrest me for singing in a public place. And I was like, I'm not having that. I'm not going to be arrested. I'm not going to be arrested for singing in a public place. So then, with my knowledge of the law, started questioning him of his knowledge of the law. And my knowledge was so good that he actually ran away from me. And he ended up in every paper running away from me because he didn't know the law. And the headline was police officers don't know the law. And I was like, he didn't have a clue. And then another time we were in Manchester, it was a Tory party conference, and by this time I do suspect that there's a picture that goes round and officers just trying to arrest me before I can make trouble. And I don't drink, and these officers were just following me everywhere. And like everyone's like, why? And I'm like, because they're just looking for a reason to arrest me. And this officer walks over me, and he was like, he was just getting more urgent. And I was like, why is he going to arrest me at this moment? And he's like, you're drinking in a public place. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I had a bottle here, those ginger beers. It was like a glass bottle of ginger beer. And he's like, it says beer. And I was like, yeah, it says ginger beer. And just at the moment that he realised he couldn't arrest me, Jacob Rees-Mogg walked past and I just ran at him. And I was like asking him about his racism, about all his horrendous policies. And he told me off and he told me, well, if you stop shouting and being so aggressive, I might be able to answer you. And he didn't answer me, but if you look on the Instagram, it's there. One of the photographers, Neil Terry, got a photo of the moment that he was wagging his finger at me, telling me off. And he went viral trying to tone police me as a woman. He told me not to shout, so I should learn to use my quiet voice, really.
Okay, so advice that you might give to young people as opposed to like new people. Definitely, I would say don't dive in at the deep end. What happened down in Bristol fills me with horror every time I think about those young lads who've ended up doing 14 years because they got caught up in stuff. And our campaigns put quite a lot of time into trying to make sure people know their rights before they get involved in stuff. But it always worries me that if we try and grow the movements, that we might end up with vulnerable people who jump in, and that worries me. So yeah, we don't dive into the deep end. The other one would be wary of being seduced. You know, so where you've got camps and stuff like that, I have said to some people who turn up on the field, you know, just, I don't know if you use those words, but I think these camps, they are amazing on so many fronts, but yeah, that's what I would say. And then funny stories. So I think the funniest one for me was, you probably all know that during COVID, the HS2 workers were carrying on as normal, along with all the construction workers around the country. And so Stop HS2, a lot of us said, stuff your COVID rules. If they're working, we're out working, stopping HS2. And so much went on under lockdown, and nobody could see it going on because everyone was locked up. And all these arrests were going on, and the net came out. And we were dealing with Five Rivers. Now, Five Rivers was this company that was landscaping, but actually it brought in all the tree destroyers and etc., etc. Anyway, we had a full-on battle with these people from March the 26th, when they started evicting us and shutting down public pathways 4 days earlier than being agreed. And you learn how to kind of call out, all their illegal practices and, and use that in your defence and stuff when you get arrested wrongly, etc., etc. But eventually, they had 6 weeks off. We caused such a stink for so many weeks that the police, the HS2, all the security guys, everything went quiet for 6 weeks. And when they came back, Five Rivers and Tom Jackson, bless him, we gave him such a headache, they weren't there anymore, and Martin's was the company that took over. So now we're up against the tree surgeons, your tree destroyers called Martin's. Anyway, move on to the Fossway. On the Fossway, apparently HS2 forgot to count all the oak trees and all the big trees that lined the streets. They counted the ones, the 800,000 trees going from the woodlands, but they forgot to count all the ones along our English roads, and some of which are like 400 years old oak trees, real beauties, Anyway, like I was saying before, tree surgeons like to take more than they're supposed to. Along the Fossway, there was a section where the train was going to go through, where they needed to take the trees, but they were taking upside and downside of the section that was needed, and we were trying to point this out on the plans and everything. Anyway, what happened was they used to shut the road every day and then bring the workers in, but if you got up a tree before they shut the road, then that was your way of saving the tree for the day. So it was summertime, and one morning I went up about 6 o'clock, threw my rope up, got up into the tree, and Gilly, who's the manager for this new company, Martin's, comes along, rolls his eyes. You get to know these workers because you see them every day, He rolls his eyes and goes, oh, what we're going to do today. And so we managed to save that tree for a day. Next morning I turn up and he's there. Oh, no, I'm just getting my rope thrown up, and he pulls in this little white Renault, jumps out of his car and starts tugging at the rope. I'm thinking, is this really happening? It's like tug of war, And then his friends came past in a van and started laughing at him because he was like trying to pull the rope off me, and I was being like, you're not having my rope. And he was like, oh, yes, I am. Oh, no, you're not. And because he was being humiliated because all his friends thought this was really hilarious, he kind of mooched off, and I got my rope up. And I had a second day, saved the tree for a second day. But on the third day, they'd worked out how to kind of disable me, and by breaking the laws, of course. And even though the police came in, well, it's not a really funny story. I can't think of stories. They always end in tears, But no, the funny bit was the tug of war with Gilly. Yeah.
I met a security guard on the gates of Glastonbury, who told me that your campaign had made him quite a lot of extra money. Actually, he's very grateful for the work. Just to say. But I never really know what to say. When it's like, oh, what was the funny time? I mean, there's been quite a lot of funny times, and I think because Extinction Rebellion's been so much. It's like in a normal episode of life, you go, oh yeah, do you remember that time and that thing, what happened in 2019? But it's a bit of a blur, to be honest. I mean, there's too much, it's too much. I remember with like more clarity in some ways the sort of humiliation of the campaigns that we did before Extinction Rebellion, like going and spray painting City Hall. Ricky was there some of the time. Various people were knocking about taking photos of us and stuff. And I remember making these like, we were trying to get put on remand on purpose, basically, by breaking bail conditions again, by spray painting City Hall. It was part of an air pollution campaign. And I made us all these stripy jumpsuits, trying to like make them the perfect size so they fit every single member of the crew, which was quite a challenge when you like look at the different, it's like me, Roger, some other people that are very different shape, and making the pockets all the perfect size for like spray cans so that you could like just fit them in and they'd be hidden from sight, and then us lot run over to the windows of City Hall whilst the security guards, once they got used to us coming every like other day or whatever, they'd be like, it's the farmer again, and it was like that was their nickname for Roger, and then they'd all try and like get in the way of like what you were going to do, and then you turn round and Roger's done his spray painting on the window and he's fucking spelt pollution wrong, and it's just like, oh god, no, like that. Someone else has like run along the wall on the Thames and like just carried on because no one's intervened, and then you go, oh, you see that corner you've gone round, you spray painted the bottom of Tower Bridge, that's like, isn't that like a UNESCO heritage thing or something? Like, we weren't quite meant to do that. So it's like, in some ways, all the sort of like hapless stuff that started like before Exile is a bit clearer. It feels like there's a bit more like room around all of it, to be honest, because afterwards it's all gone a bit mental. As far as advice goes to like younger people, you know, I do spend time with young people, teaching and lecturing and tutoring them in art schools, and there's today and yesterday I was actually teaching a module in design college in a university on a design course, which was about designing products that help you live through social collapse, and it's not. It's not a fictitious sort of potential future. This isn't like a sort of, oh, imagine if you were going to live through social collapse and let's do a creative project on it. It's like, it's a project that's rooted in what's actually going to fucking happen to them. And I find it very painful, but to my mind, the only sort of reasonable thing that you can say to young people now is that you have to go and make the world in a different way, and don't let any fucker get in your way, because it is shit and loads of people fucking don't like it, and it's set on a suicide mission, and it is your right to make it totally different, and the people who are holding it in place need to fuck off and get out of the way, and you've got every right to force them out of the way and to change the way that everything's designed and that everything works. And I, as an older person, which I know people think I'm not old, but I did just turn 40 and I feel quite old compared to art students. They, you know, as a grown-up person and a tutor and a lecturer and an educator, I need to help them to do that and have their fucking back, you know. So there's an awful lot that people can learn from older activists, and it's really super important that the learning goes like intergenerationally both ways, in my opinion. Yeah. But the main thing to say to young people is like, just make the world different because some twats made it like this and it's shit. Yeah.
Okay, give a really quick blast of what's next, and then we'll do some questions and get some drinks.
Okay. I'm not going to say what I'm going to do next because it's meant not to be said, but I'm really, really clear that it chimes with my advice to young people, which is partially quoting my grandmother and partially, I think, one of the Levellers. There is time for sleep and silence in the grave. And in the meanwhile, you have a moral compass, and you should follow your moral compass and supersede the capitalist mode of production.
What's next? So I am recording when I'm no longer talking to institutionally racist police tomorrow. Something I'm super proud of. I've got a chapter in a book called Letters to My Wife's Best Friend coming out this year. It's published by Bloomsbury. I'm super proud of. I helped develop. So you know that one time when no one wanted to hear what I've got to say? Well, all of a sudden people are kind of like, can you come and say it to this room full of social workers, this room full of youth workers? And there's kind of no caveats where I basically can say what I want. And so I helped develop a play about stop and search being disproportionately used against young black people, and we've managed to get it booked out in schools and youth centres for the next month. So going on tour and doing workshops with young people about the real advice they need around the police, how to keep themselves as safe as they can, and how to hold those fuckers to account when they're not put in positions where they are safe. I think, and I got a visiting lecturer again, and you really like someone actually employed me. So I'm going to be lecturing as well, and hopefully get on a PhD. I've got to go though and get in training. See you later, guys. Love you.
Okay, so definitely going to be doing as much work with the established left, as I call them, and we're working on trying to get things coordinated across the regions, because there's loads of links. We just got to get a bit more tied in. So yeah, this is a shout out at everyone here. If you've not yet been onto a picket line, now is the time, and all you need to do is. The big problem is it's quite difficult finding the information of who's striking where, the location, the time. There's nothing more disheartening than turning up to a place and you're the only one there and you're going, well, this isn't working. So, that is the biggest obstacle in supporting the strikes, is making sure that you've got the relevant information. But all you have to do is start talking to people around you, and someone will help you find it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is fighting the judiciary. I despise the way that the judiciary are setting us up in the court systems to fail by having rulings about not being able to speak our truth. Otherwise you're in contempt of court because of the way they manipulate their procedures. So that's ongoing, especially with all the Interstate Britain trials. There's 52 trials, something coming up. So far it's 2-0 to us, but anything can happen any day. Yeah, it certainly wasn't, the Barclay 7, totally, the actions around the 27th, loads of, we're all in there one way or another. And the final thing is injunctions. I am the biggest hater of injunctions probably in this country. I have been starting to try and organise mass trespass in a synchronised way against all injuncted campaigns. First of all, they took away the land from ordinary people with enclosures, and now we're all sitting here as they criminalise us for going back on the land they stole from us, and we can't afford to do it. So anyone who's down for standing up for our rights, we have to resist the injunctions. Nothing's happening quite yet, but there's been quite a lot of work done in the background. There's a lot of interested people. The only way it works is boots on the ground, and we're going to try and make it non-arrestable. So keep your ears to the ground, okay? Cheers.
What's next? Well, everyone has to pay attention to the 27th of January, which is when the Barclays women are going to get seen in court for their sentencing, and that's my solidarity with them, but also very helpful for those of us who may have a similar experience waiting ahead of us. Obviously, Exiles said it's going to build up to this big numbers game in April, so fingers crossed that people are going to actually mobilise their tits off towards that, because, it seems like you either climb a gantry or get loads of mates. And so it's a sliding scale. It's always what I think people see. Like, you either have a lot of people or you have a small number of people who do fucking amazingly challenging and courageous things. So you know, hopefully we can bring out the big numbers of people. And I think the main thing that I've been trying to do at the start of January is just like get people to see the potential that's before us. It's not just people on picket lines that are striking, it's people that are like sick to fucking death of looking at raw sewage being pumped into the rivers and the ocean. Like Emma Boyd, who used to be the lead of the Environment Agency, wrote a report for the government before she left her post that basically opened with a paragraph that said the managers and executives of private water companies should be jailed by the government. That's a government report that in the first fucking paragraph recommends a jail sentence for people from the private sector on the environment. It's not happening. So we've got friends in all these places that we don't expect. We know that there are people across the conservation space that are really upset, really exercised. We know that Black Lives Matter and the racial justice movement has completely transformed the conversation on social justice and racial justice in this country in the last few years. We've got a really fucking organised climate movement. We've got a really potentially, amazingly explosive moment around like discussions about a general strike and all of the different sectors who are striking over pay, and people who are talking about doing non-cooperation and not paying bills, and people who are talking about all different forms of non-cooperation as a means for getting what they want, because this country doesn't fucking work for most people. It's shit. It's turning into an authoritarian shithole. Our civil liberties are being gobbled up by idiots in the Conservative Party, and everyone actually finds themselves largely on the same side in some way or another. And you might not agree with everyone on all of the causes, but you definitely agree with them on some of it. And so, you know, what I think has happened here is that the moment is before us to bring the country together and say, actually, most people actually would have each other's backs much better than the state have got anyone's backs. They've polarised everybody, and you look at the Liz Truss kind of anti-growth coalition rhetoric, and she just pointed that out, like, anyone who's not on my side is against me, and that's fucking all of us. So it's like, you know, she told you all, she told everyone there was a moment here, she fucking helped, everyone's got to like wake up. So it's, for me, it's about having those conversations. And you know, what Anna's been saying about this, what Brian Eno's been quoting recently, you have a moment where people realise that it's time for revolutionary change. But the real important moment is the moment when everyone realises that every fucker else has also realised. Because then you go, oh, okay, let's do it. So that's what we're trying for the run up to April, and let's see how it goes.
Yeah.